Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Dr. Saida Banu and I am Associate Professor of Obstetrics and Gynecology at Sahiwal Medical College, Sahiwal. Today's lecture is for final year and the topic is urogynecology, and in this subspecialty mainly I will discuss with you incontinence. Uterovaginal prolapse and vesicovaginal fistula will be discussed in an other lecture. Now, the learning objectives of my lecture. At the end of the presentation, the students would be able to understand mechanism of continence in women and how disorders of this mechanism of continence can lead to symptomatology. And then also you will be learning how to assess a patient with incontinence by means of history, examination and relevant investigations. We will discuss general types of urinary incontinence as well, so you will be able to understand two types of incontinence. And then you will be understanding the principles of urodynamic testing, and then at the end of the lecture you would be able to understand the principles and treatment of incontinence, and you would be able to describe the effectiveness of each treatment together with an understanding of the potential side effects and complications. Now, the relevant functional anatomy of the bladder of the micturition cycle. In health, bladder stores and voids the urine, and this is known as micturition cycle. Most of the time, the trusser muscle of the bladder is relaxed, allows storage of increasing volume of urine, and there is no increase in pressure. So as bladder capacity is reached, signals from the stretch receptors in the bladder wall, they send sensations of filling to the spinal cord. There is micturition center in the spinal cord, but the sphincter mechanism is closed. As an adult, there is voluntary delay of the micturition until socially convenient is achieved by cortical inhibition of the spinal voiding reflex arc. And before voiding begins, this inhibition is removed by the and the pelvic floor and urethral sphincter. They relax in coordinated fashion, and the trusser contraction is allowed and bladder is emptied. So there is central inhibition of the spinal reflex arc. Even if the bladder is full, the sphincter is closed by cortical inhibition from the brain. So when there is socially convenient, the inhibition is removed, and then pelvic floor is relaxed, urethral sphincter is relaxed, and then the trusser contraction occurs and there is bladder emptying. So this is normal micturition cycle, or this is normal micturition reflex. Now, what is the innervation of the bladder? Of course, bladder is innervated by nervous system, and also it has got input from the cortex. So it is very important, because this innervation will be applied when we will discuss different types of incontinence and treatment options. The trusser muscle is innervated by muscarinic cholinergic nerves of the parasympathetic nervous system, and these parasympathetic cholinergic nerves, they release acetylcholine at the motor end plate, and this leads to the trusser muscle contractions. Urethral sphincter is innervated by noradrenergic neurons of the sympathetic nervous system, and it leads to sphincter contraction. Also, there are noradrenergic neurons innervating the detrusor muscles, and they lead to relaxation of the bladder wall, the detrusor muscles. So mainly the cholinergic fibers or acetylcholine has an important role in voiding, and this urethral sphincter important role in storage and inhibition of voiding. Then also there is innervation by somatic nerve fibers with the help of pudendal nerve from the spinal cord, and there is voluntary contraction and relaxation of the urethral sphincter with the help of these fibers. So in the pictorial, this is the pictorial evidence of the relevant functional anatomy. This is the bladder, these are the ureters emptying the bladder. The urine production rate is 1 to 2 mils per second, and these are two ureteral openings here, and then this is detrusor muscle, and there is Ruge formation, and then there is trigone. At the both ends of the trigone, ureters are opening. Then sphincter mechanism is very important in females. So there is internal urethral orifice, there is urethra, this is hip bone. Here you can see internal urethral sphincter, which is involuntary smooth muscles, then external urethral sphincter, deep muscles of the perineum, voluntary striated muscles, external urethral sphincter, external urethral orifice. Again same. So ureter, openings, wall of bladder, parasympathetic neurons, and internal urethral sphincter. Then there is urethra, then motor neurons, external urethral sphincter. This is from the somatic nerve fibers. This is autonomic nervous system. Now innervation in more detail. Detrusor muscle, bladder. There are M3 receptors, cholinergic receptors, and at the motor end plate there is release of acetylcholine by the cholinergic nerve fibers. Then the sympathetic nervous system, this is parasympathetic, the cholinergic ones with the acetylcholine causing contraction of the bladder muscles, and parasympathetic nerves with the help of hypogastric nerve, they act on beta 3 receptors of the bladder and they cause relaxation of the detrusor muscles. And then hypogastric nerves, they also act on the internal urethral sphincter, they release norepinephrine, and there are alpha 1 receptors, they leads to contraction of the external urethral sphincter. Then there are somatic pudendal nerves which release acetylcholine, and there are nicotinic receptors, and they innervate the external urethral sphincter, and then this is diaphragm. Then there is also a role from the central nervous system. There is inhibition and facilitation of the voiding from the brain, sympathetic nervous system, alpha adrenergic fibers, smooth muscles, sphincter contraction and relaxation. Then parasympathetic nervous system, cholinergic fibers, they leads to detrusor contraction and relaxation. Then somatic nervous system, striated sphincter contraction and relaxation by the external urethral sphincter muscles. So another important aspect in emptying, what happens, the bladder, the detrusor contraction via parasympathetic nerves, via S2 and 4 pelvic nerve, and there is detrusor contraction and there is urethral sphincter relaxation. And somatic nerves via pudendal nerve, external urethral sphincter contraction, and pelvic floor muscle contraction. So these are the actions of the at the time of empty. Normal urethral sphincter mechanism. what happens? In women, the urethral sphincter mechanism is a functional system. It includes internal smooth muscle fibers and external striated muscle fibers, and the muscles of the pelvic floor and pubourethral ligament supporting the urethra within the abdominal cavity. So urethra is an abdominal organ normal healthy ladies, in the normal healthy ladies. So when there is increase in the abdominal pressure, it is transmitted equally to the bladder and bladder neck, and so the urethral sphincter and bladder neck is closed with raised abdominal pressure. In premenopausal women, the urethral epithelium has a rich blood supply and contributes to continence by acting as a seal. So, what happens in case of incontinence or stress incontinence? This urethral sphincter mechanism, it has sagged down because of weakening of the pelvic floor and striated and also the ligaments. So these striated urethral sphincter muscles, now they are below the abdominal cavity, they are below the pelvic floor, so the pressure exceeds the urethral closure pressure whenever there is increase in the intra-abdominal pressure, as in case of stress urinary incontinence, so it leads to leakage. So same repetition, functional system, internal and external smooth muscles, and then a rich blood supply in premenopausal women. Now there are functions of the bladder. There are functions as a storage, and then there are function as a voiding apparatus. So if there are problems with the storage, then patient cannot store urine till the maximal bladder capacity, which is 500 ml, and the patient will feel a sensation of urine and the pressure will be raised. So patient will be voiding too often in a day, which is called frequency. So urine storage symptoms, they are frequency, nocturia, has to wake up to void one or more times at night, then urgency, sudden compelling desire to pass urine, then urgent continence, there is involuntary leakage as with urgency, then there is stress incontinence, involuntary on effort, then there is nocturnal enuresis, there is loss of urine occurring during sleep. Then function urine bladder, as already said, storage and voiding. Because of voiding dysfunction, there could be urethral blockage, and if this is much more, bladder is unable to empty properly, so it can lead to overflow incontinence. In case of storage symptoms, when there is coughing or sneezing because of relaxed pelvic floor, there is sagging of the urethral sphincter mechanism below the abdominal cavity. So when there is increased abdominal pressure, there will be incontinence of urine on coughing and sneezing. So another type of incontinence which leads to storage is urge incontinence. There is bladder oversensitivity from infection or some other mechanism, or could be neurological disorders, so bladder is unable to more store, so it is voiding. There is compelling desire to void it. Then voiding symptoms are slow stream, splitting or spring of stream, intermittent flow, hesitancy, and then there is terminal dribble. Then urinary incontinence. First is stress urinary incontinence. The urinary incontinence mechanism of continence is maintained when the maximal urethral pressure exceeds the maximum bladder pressure, or when urethral closure pressure is positive. So this is sphincter muscle, this is the urethral opening, these are the pelvic floor muscles, so this is tightly closed. Now what happens in stress urinary incontinence? If the facial support is weakened like this, or this. So the urethra can move downwards at times of increased abdominal pressure, causing bladder pressure to exceed urethral sphincter closure pressure. Hypermobile urethra. Incomplete urethral closure may be due to scarring or neuromuscular damage and causes a more severe form of stress urinary incontinence or intrinsic sphincter deficiency. Most of the time it is urethral hypermobility, and diagnosis stress urinary incontinence is suggested by history, physical examination and positive stress tests, demonstrable loss of urine while the patient is being examined. So here again, pathophysiology, the basic is urethral incompetence. This can be due to urethral hypermobility in 80 to 90% of patients, or could be in 10 to 20% patients intrinsic sphincter dysfunction. And urethral hypermobility result from loss of normal pelvic support mechanism of the bladder and urethra because of trauma and stretching of vaginal delivery, hysterectomy, hormonal changes, that is menopause, pelvic denervation and congenital weakness. Then there are risk factors for stress urinary incontinence. There is multiparity, particularly vaginal birth, forceps delivery, perineal trauma, prolonged labor, epidural analgesia, birth weight more than 5 kg, increasing age, postmenopause, obesity, connective tissue disorders, chronic cough, doxazosine alpha agonist for hypertension because it leads to relaxation of the urethral sphincter. So drug history is also very important. Obstetric history, multiparity, forceps delivery, perineal trauma, long labor, epidural analgesia, baby weight. So very important. Then obesity, then cough, constipation. So past medical surgical history is also very important. So mechanism of stress urinary incontinence is already discussed, that obstetric risk factors, they act by combination effect of stretching or damage to the pudendal nerves and also overstretching or even avulsion of the pelvic floor muscles from their insertions on the pelvic side walls. Direct muscle damage results in loss of pelvic floor support and hence urethral hypermobility. Pudendal nerve damage causes both weakening of the pelvic floor muscles and urethral sphincter. Muscle damage can be seen on magnetic resonance. Then overactive bladder or detrusor overactivity. Detrusor overactivity is characterized by involuntary detrusor contractions during the filling phase of the micturition cycle, which can be seen during a urodynamic investigation. Women with detrusor overactivity often complain of symptoms of overactive bladder but remains continent unless urethral sphincter function is compromised or detrusor contractions are of very high pressure and amplitude and overcome urethral resistance. Etiology of detrusor overactivity. It is poorly understood. There is difference in the sensory and interstitial nerves in the bladder wall of the patients compared to controls, and there is alteration in the expression of several different neurotransmitters and their receptors. Few risk factors are most modifiable are smoking and obesity. All continent surgery carries a risk of 5 to 10% new detrusor overactivity. So there are risk factors for detrusor overactivity: childhood bedwetting, obesity, smoking, previous hysterectomy, previous continence. Clinical assessment of incontinence. How are we going to assess a patient with urinary incontinence? A detailed history is very important. Then physical examination, general abdominal and pelvic examination. Then fresh midstream urine for culture sensitivity to rule out infection. Then we have to maintain 3-day bladder diary in which the patient drinks or voids or incontinence episodes. They are recorded in a tabulated form, and so we know the patient's lifestyle and actual subjective assessment of patient's complaints. Then pelvic and renal ultrasound. So in the history, we will ask about whether the incontinence is related with cough or sneezing or laughing, or it is associated with urgency or urgent continence. So overactive bladder symptoms or could be mixed symptoms. Then what is the severity of the incontinence, whether it is affecting the patient's lifestyle or not. Then frequency day and night is very important, how many times day, how many times night. And then urgency, which is compelling desire to pass urine. Then need of continence pads or changing clothes because of leakage. What behavioral changes, limit fluid intake or restrict social activities. Then associated symptoms of lapse, fecal incontinence, any sexual difficulties. Then detailed medical surgical history. Then clinical examination should exclude pelvic masses, for example fibroids, and assess patient's ability to contract her pelvic floor muscles and strength of that contraction. Then red flag symptoms are rectal bleeding, hematuria or significant pain. Then we have to do radiological investigations and advanced investigations. This is a 3-day unit diary. Here time is mentioned from 8 o'clock one day till 6 p.m. at night, or like that. The time is adjusted in the waking hours. Then amount voided, patient measures the amount of voided, and then what is the volume of leak. It is small, it is large, it is moderate, and then urge is present or not, what was the activity at the time of leakage, and what is the amount and type of intake. Okay, I will show you an example. This is an example of a bladder diary of a patient. Name of the patient is written, then patient date of birth. Here we can assess the age of the patient, then what is the date, and day 1 diary. Time 7:30. Type of drink orange juice, coffee. Amount of drink 150 ml. Urine output at night it is recorded 2:30, and then how urgent 1 to 3, most urgent. Then activity at the time, for example reaching front door, walk to use toilet, walk to use toilet, like this. Then leakage, damp, wet, soap, none. Here it is wet, here it is damp, it is wet. And then orange juice, coffee. So we can have an idea that what is the lifestyle of the patient, whether this type of drinking is attributed to this type of leakage or not. Then the key learning points up till now. Stress incontinence is typically a result of a weak urethral sphincter, often as a consequence of childbirth. Diffusal overactivity causes urgency, frequency, and nocturia, but not all patients they have leakage. History should include direct questions about fecal leakage or leakage during sexual intercourse. Clinical examination should exclude pelvic masses, for example fibroid uterus, and assess patient's ability to contract her floor muscles and strength of that contraction. Women with pain, hematuria or recurrent infection should have renal tract investigated radiologically and by cystoscopy. Then what is the treatment of incontinence? So conservative treatment and the role of urodynamic assessment is the mainstay of treatment. Then advice about fluid balance, then reduction of caffeine intake. Then there should be bladder retraining, mostly for overactive bladder or urgency, and then pelvic floor muscle exercises. Conservative management and the role of urodynamic assessment. Pelvic floor muscle exercises, bladder retraining, urodynamic. So pelvic floor muscle exercises increase number of contractions and increase the duration of hold of contractions, and there is direct coaching while being examined vaginally to ensure correct identification of the elevator muscle complex. Without confirmation by direct examination, only 40% of women will be able to correctly initiate a contraction of pelvic floor. Individualized exercise programs are devised for each patient to increase both the number of contractions that can be performed consecutively and to increase the duration of hold. Successful adherence to the program can lead to cure in 50% of women and improvement in 75%. It works both for overactive bladder and stress urinary incontinence. And adherence and perseverance to the program is very, very important. So this is tense your pelvic floor muscle starting at your anus as if trying to stop passing wind. Now tense around your vagina trying to stop your wee and squeeze both areas and aim to suck up your muscles towards your belly button. Hold your squeeze for 5 seconds or as long as you can and relax for 5 seconds. Repeat your squeeze and lift 5 times. So this is one of the ways of pelvic floor muscle exercises, and this is very, very helpful. So here again pelvic floor muscle training 1 to 5. Here also this way and then so this way. So there are different ways. So patient can do it while sitting, while lying down, while standing, while sitting, and while even in the bathtub. Bladder retraining. It involves re-educating the patient and her bladder to increase the interval between voids to re-establish normal frequency, and we encourage the patient to practice delayed voiding for several minutes beyond when she would normally void. It is usual to do this in a stepwise fashion, and it requires perseverance. So encourage the patient to practice delayed voiding for several minutes beyond when she would normally void. It is usual to do this in a stepwise fashion, and also it requires perseverance and determination on the part of the patient. It is important to consult the women about the benefits of weight loss for those who are overweight or obese. Obesity is associated with increased risk and severity of stress incontinence due to increase in the abdominal pressure, and also associated with increased severity of overactive bladder. Several studies have demonstrated that weight loss leads to improvement in both stress and urge incontinence, and weight loss can result in cure. So it is treat urge incontinence by voiding by clock, and then freeze and squeeze or sigh and dry. So pelvic floor exercises and bladder retraining, these actions can help the client to get through initial sensations to void that occur more frequently with this kind of incontinence. Not voiding with each urge can refrain the bladder so that the need to void is increased to every 2 hours and when the bladder is actually full. Bladder retraining begins with assessing the client's ability to recognize the urge to void, completion of 3-day voiding pattern history. Once voiding pattern has been established, encourage the client to void 30 minutes before the projected time of incontinence. So this is the flow chart of incontinence patient history and examination, including paravaginal examination, and if in elderly, exclude constipation, drug related cause, treat UTI and reduce fluid intake, and then incontinence and voiding difficulty. If both, then we have to refer the patient to specialized care. If normal, then urine analysis, it is the first step, then negative urine analysis. If it is predominant stress, refer to physiotherapy or pelvic floor muscle exercises or drill. 3-month supervised physiotherapy, electrical stimulation feedback. If there is improvement, well and good. If no, then refer. If there is frequency urgency, urgent incontinence, then review diary, bladder scan, residual urine volume. Here again pelvic floor muscle exercises, bladder drill, then anticholinergic medications, local hormone replacement therapy in review in 2 to 3 months with repeat diary, little or no change, refer. If mixed, review flow input and diary prior to referral commencement. Bladder drill and pelvic floor muscle exercises. A trial of anticholinergic drug can be considered while waiting for appointment, and then referral. Urodynamic testing, it was an important tool in the past, but now it is reserved for patients who fail to improve with conservative management. The purpose of urodynamic testing is to reproduce a micturition cycle, that is bladder filling and voiding, while recording abdominal and bladder pressures and attempting to reproduce the patient's symptoms to provide diagnosis. And it is reserved for patients with recurrent symptoms, those with complex histories, or who have undergone previous surgery for incontinence or prolapse, and for overactive bladder considering second line intervention. So this is one of the way how we do urodynamic assessment. So we pass a catheter in the bladder and we fill the bladder with normal saline, warm normal saline. A transducer is inserted in the bladder which records bladder pressures, and another transducer is inserted in the rectum which records abdominal pressures, and then voiding flow rate is also measured, and all recordings, they are in a machine. So here again, peristaltic pump for bladder, for filling the bladder, bladder pressure transducer, rectal pressure for abdominal pressure, then total bladder pressure is measured. Intrinsic bladder pressure is gained by deducting abdominal pressure from the bladder pressure. This rectal pressure, P rectal, it measures the abdominal pressure, then flow rate is measured, and all recordings, they are calculated in a computer. Here the patient lies in this way, and here this is the screen, and here vesical pressure is measured, detrusor pressure is measured, abdominal pressure is measured, and then voiding here, or any leakage with coughing or sneezing is measured. This is urine flow rate when the patient voids. If this is bell, time to maximum flow, and voided volume, maximum flow rate, this is normal. Here you can see there are interruptions. Voiding time is prolonged and it is small stream. So this shows some voiding dysfunction. So here this is the cystometrogram or urodynamic chart from the urodynamic machine. Here there is vesical pressure. Here this is detrusor overactivity. Normally while filling there should be no increase in the detrusor pressure. And then this is abdominal pressure and this is detrusor pressure. So normally when there is filling there should be no detrusor activity. If during filling their activity is seen in the detrusor, this means that detrusor is hyperactive, and this is detrusor overactivity, or this is overactive bladder. Here again P vesical, P detrusor, P abdominal, and this is flow. So this is just to make you familiar that you should not be astonished if you see a urodynamic chart. You should know that these are some lines and they show some pressures, and we can make diagnosis with the help of urodynamics. So detrusor overactivity, the presence of detrusor contraction with or without sensation during filling phase of the urodynamics. Detrusor overactivity, over incontinence when there is leakage in from the urethra in association with detrusor contraction and increase in pressure. Then urodynamic stress incontinence, there is leakage from the urethra in association with a rise in bladder pressure, coughing without detrusor contraction, a sign of urethral sphincter weakness. Then there is mixed incontinence. Then up till now, what are the key learning points? Conservative treatment with fluid advice, pelvic floor exercises, and bladder retraining is the first line for all patients with incontinence or overactive bladder, and ideally should be delivered in a primary care settings. So just fluid advice, reduce fluid intake but not that much, reduce caffeine, reduce juices, then pelvic floor exercises and bladder retraining. That's all. Patient motivation is important for success of conservative treatment. Urodynamic investigation is not always necessary before commencing drug treatment or before surgery in women only complaining of stress incontinence. A urodynamic assessment should be done for women who fail to respond to anticholinergic medications or women with mixed symptoms for whom surgery is being considered. Now, what is the medical treatment for incontinence? So, I will discuss both for stress and for urge. So, usually the medical treatment is for urge incontinence or overactive bladder, and because as we know the bladder muscles, they are innervated by cholinergic fibers and somehow by the beta adrenergic nerve fibers, so both of the medications they are available. So traditionally these are the anticholinergic medications, and they are oxybutynine, propionine, tropsim chloride, doltarhodine, solifenacin. All anticholinergic drugs, they have similar efficacy, and with published randomized studies demonstrating a decrease in urgency and incontinence episodes in the range of 1 to 2 per day compared with placebo. The side effect profile is similar across all drugs, with dry mouth, constipation, blurred vision being the most common. There is a wide range of different compounds, as I have already mentioned. The main site of action of anticholinergic drugs is motor end plate of neuromuscular junction, where they antagonize the action of acetylcholine at the muscarinic receptors and inhibit detrusor contraction. So mainly for detrusor overactivity. In the last 5 years, it has become apparent that acetylcholine is also an important neurotransmitter in the afferent sensory pathways in the bladder, and thus the drug also have a direct effect in reducing the perceived sensations of bladder filling by inhibiting receptor mediated afferent signals. So also there is a new drug, myrbetrione, is a more recently developed medication for overactive bladder. It is beta-3 adrenergic agonist. Myrbetrione acts upon sympathetic neurons innervating the bladder to enhance relaxation of the detrusor. Therefore, it is acting more on the storage function of the bladder than do anticholinergic medications, which act by suppressing voiding. Myrbetrione can be used simultaneously with an anticholinergic drug. Then in postmenopausal ladies, we can use topical estrogen and it reduces urgency. Duloxetine is a drug which is very occasionally used for incontinence. It is combined serotonin noradrenergic reuptake inhibitor. It has dual license for the treatment of depression, and in high doses. Duloxetine acts in the micturition center in the sacral spinal cord to increase sympathetic nerve output to the uterine sphincter and increase sphincter tone. Randomized trial, they show 50% improvement or more leakage symptoms in over half of the patients treated. However, side effects including nausea cause many women to stop the treatment. So initial management, history, symptom assessment, incontinence with physical activity, that is stress incontinence, mixed symptoms with urgency frequency. So general assessment, you need symptom assessment, frequency volume chart, then assess quality of life, then physical examination, abdominal pelvic, then cough test to demonstrate stress incontinence, then urine analysis to rule out infection, then assess voluntary pelvic floor muscle contraction, then assess post void residual volume. If other abnormality, then we have to refer the patient. Pelvic masses prolapse from the, this is from the primary care settings. So if stress incontinence, sphincter incompetence, then assess the estrogen status, lifestyle, intervention, pelvic floor muscle training, bladder retraining, then other physical therapies devices, then duloxetine. Failure, specialized management. Then mixed, again same, urge same, then in the urge, antimuscarinics. anticholinergics. So here what happens with the in the specialized areas. So if the patient has these diagnoses, refer to specialist center. So if there is sphincter incompetence, then stress incontinence surgery, and if prolapse, we have to correct the prolapse. If bladder hypersensitivity and initial therapy fails, then there is neurostimulation, sacral blockade, bladder augmentation, unidimension. If outflow obstruction, then intermittent catheterization, biofeedback, and then low urinary tract anomaly, correct anatomy, and treat with surgical treatment for stress incontinence overactivity. Surgery option for stress incontinence: Burch corpus suspension, no mesh; pubovaginal sling, no mesh; then mid-urethral sling, we use mesh. In case of TVT and TOT, tension-free vaginal tapes, and then urethral bulking agent. So these are the options for stress urinary incontinence. So for stress urinary incontinence, this is transvaginal tape, transobturator tape. This is a tape, and this is inserted in the urethral area, so it elevates the urethra, so urethral hypermobility is cured. So here again, this is a retropubic tape, tension-free vaginal tape. This is transobturator tape. The mechanism is hammock-like effect to elevate the urethra, and then here it is shown what we do during surgery. So transobturator sling reposition, urethral sphincter zone proximity. So history of only stress leakage or on urodynamic assessment, surgery is highly effective treatment. The first line and highly effective is mid-urethral tape procedure, as I have already showed you. Tension-free vaginal tape, retropubic or transobturator tape. Long-term success rate is 80 to 85% for stress incontinence with this tape, and common operative complications are voiding difficulty, bladder perforation, and onset of new overactive bladder symptoms after surgery. So very low rate. Then other surgical treatments for stress urinary incontinence. One is Burch corpus suspension. It was the primary procedure for SUI for many years before the mid-urethral tapes were developed. Cure rate same as tapes, 80 to 85%. Long-term risk 5 to 10% of developing posterior vaginal wall prolapse. It is more invasive, more time consuming. Then there are periurethral bulking agents. This is the third option, surgery for stress urinary incontinence. These are injections of materials that bulk up the bladder neck and coat the urethral mucosa to prevent leakage. They could be microscopic beads or viscous liquid, and the names are macroplastic, Durasphere, and Bulkmate. These are usually reserved for medically unfit patients. It has cure rate of 60 to 80%, and for a time period, it has to be repeated. So then surgical treatment for overactive bladder. So this is botulinum toxin A or Botox, and this is shown how cystoscopically we insert this toxin at different areas of the bladder, which causes flaccid paralysis of the diffuser. So Botox for bladder. The bladder will be filled with sterile water, and then very small injections of Botox will be placed into the bladder wall. This injection process should take 5 to 10 minutes. So actually we mix this Botox with our dye, and this is inserted systematically through cystoscope with the help of small needle, and dye is to help us that which areas of the bladder we have completed. Bladder trigone area is avoided, because if we are inserting in this area, then it can lead to more voiding dysfunction. For diffuser overactivity, surgical option is Botox. It is a second line treatment, but it after medical treatment, but it is highly effective in randomized controlled trials. This is a neurotoxin, botulinum toxin A, A long-acting molecule prevents release of the neurotransmitter vesicles from the motor end plate and causes flooded vessels in the treated muscle. A single intramuscular injection can last for 3 to 6 months. Reduction of urgency and leakage episodes is reported. 50 to 80% continence rate in excess of 40%. Major drawback is voiding difficulty rate of 8 to 15%. But this is long acting injection, lasts for 3 to 6 months, so it has got 50 to 80% improvement. Now at the end of the presentation there is single best question answer. 45 years old lady attends the OPD, 3 years history of stress incontinence, urgency and urge incontinence. She leaks urine about 4 times of the day, has to wear sanitary pad all the day and rarely travel due to urgency. So her lifestyle is compromised, and this is the severity, and this is wearing pads. So this is the way how you have to take history from a patient with urinary incontinence, and rarely travels due to urgency and needs to pass urine 8 to 9 times a day during the day. Examination reveals her to be of normal BMI with weak pelvic floor muscle strength. What would be the recommended first line of management? A. Commence the patient on oral anticholinergic medications for 8 weeks. B. Arrange urodynamic assessment to define the underlying cause of problem. Right. Now you have to, if you have listened the lecture carefully, you would be knowing repeatedly I have asked that what should be the first line management. Arrange a 6 to 8 week course of supervised pelvic floor muscle exercises and bladder retraining. And D. Admit the patient for cystoscopy. E. Test the urine for infection and treat with antibiotics. And also the before thank you, what is the diagnosis in this scenario? You have to answer what is the diagnosis in the given scenario, and also what is the best option. Okay, thank you very much.